I understand bullying when I see it, Mrs. Chen interrupted. And I understand that you've been targeting this family for months because their son is different. That's not true. Karen protested, but even as she said it, she felt the words ring hollow. Had she been targeting them? Every complaint she'd filed, every violation notice she'd sent, every time she'd driven by their house looking for infractions. Detective Reynolds was taking notes, his expression grave. Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand something. Several witnesses have now described a pattern of harassment toward this family. That changes the nature of this investigation. Karen's world lurched. Harassment? I'm not harassing anyone. I'm doing my job. Your job, Sarah Henderson spoke up, her voice steady despite her anger, is to serve the community, not to terrorize families who don't meet your personal standards. My personal standards? Karen laughed bitterly. These aren't personal standards. These are community covenants that everyone agreed to follow. Show me, Detective Reynolds said calmly. Show me the specific covenant that allows you to threaten residents with gardening tools. Karen's mouth opened and closed. That's not the point. The point is maintaining order and. The point, Officer Martinez interrupted, is that you committed assault with a weapon in front of multiple witnesses, including the victim. Assault. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. I never touched anyone. You don't have to touch someone to commit assault, Detective Reynolds explained. Threatening someone with a weapon while they have reasonable fear of imminent harm is textbook assault. Karen looked around at the circle of neighbors, at the police officers, at Tommy sitting quietly in his wheelchair, with his mother's protective hand on his shoulder. For the first time in 3 years of HOA presidency, she saw herself through other people's eyes. She wasn't the community protector she'd imagined herself to be. She was the neighborhood bully, the woman who'd let her need for control consume her humanity. I didn't mean, she started then stopped. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But you did, Tommy said softly. You scared me, Mrs. Whitmore. I didn't know what you were going to do. Karen felt tears burning her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't erase what happened, Sarah said firmly. And it doesn't address the months of harassment that led up to this moment. Detective Reynolds closed his notebook. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm placing you under arrest for assault with a weapon and child endangerment. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Karen realized that her perfect suburban kingdom had just collapsed around her, and she had no one to blame but herself. The booking process at the county jail was a humiliating blur of fingerprints, mugshots, and paperwork. Karen sat in the holding cell, her designer workout clothes feeling ridiculous in the sterile environment, staring at the concrete walls, and wondering how her life had imploded so completely in the span of 3 hours. Whitmore, the guard's voice echoed through the corridor. Your lawyer's here. Karen was escorted to a small conference room where David Kellerman, the HOA's attorney, sat with a briefcase and a grim expression. He'd been handling routine covenant disputes for Maple Grove Estates for 5 years, but this was far outside his usual scope. Karen, what the hell happened? David asked without preamble. I got a call from Janet Phillips saying you've been arrested for assaulting a child with a gardening tool. Karen slumped in her chair. It wasn't assault. I was trying to address a legitimate HOA violation, and things got out of hand. Out of hand. David pulled out a tablet and showed her a news article. It's already hit the local news. HOA president threatens disabled child with shovel. The story's going viral on social media. Karen's blood ran cold. Viral? The Hendersons' Ring doorbell caught most of the incident. Someone leaked the footage. David turned the tablet so she could see the screen. Karen, this looks really bad. You're clearly brandishing a weapon at a child in a wheelchair. Karen watched the grainy video in horror. From this angle, without the context of her frustration and months of buildup, she looked like a monster. The footage showed her raising the shovel while Tommy cowered in his wheelchair, his mother rushing to protect him. This isn't who I am, Karen whispered. Maybe not, David said, but it's who you were in that moment. And now it's who the world sees you as. Karen's phone, which had been returned to her, buzzed constantly with notifications. Text messages from neighbors, missed calls from reporters, and hundreds of social media alerts. The story was spreading beyond this small community. "What are my options?" she asked. "Legally, you're looking at assault charges, possibly child endangerment, and if the prosecutor decides to push it, hate crime enhancements due to the victim's disability status." "Hate crime?" Karen's voice cracked. "I don't hate disabled people. I don't hate Tommy." Karen's hands shook as she finally dropped the shovel, the metal hitting the ground with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the quiet morning air. Detective Reynolds kept his eyes on her while speaking into his radio, calling for backup and requesting a supervisor. "I want to press charges," Sarah announced, her arm protectively around Tommy's shoulders. "She threatened my son with a weapon." "It's a gardening tool," Karen protested, her voice cracking slightly. "I was doing property maintenance. This is all perfectly legal under HOA authority." Detective Reynolds pulled out his notebook, his expression neutral but alert. "Mrs. Whitmore, Karen Whitmore. I'm the president of the Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association." She straightened her shoulders, trying to reclaim some dignity. "I have every right to enforce covenant violations. And you felt that enforcement required a shovel and threatening a 12-year-old. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The reality of her actions was starting to sink in, but her pride wouldn't let her back down completely. "I wasn't threatening anyone. I was demonstrating the seriousness of this violation. These people have turned their property into a wildlife preserve." Tommy wheeled himself closer to the detective, his earlier fear replaced by curiosity. "Sir, are you really going to arrest Mrs. Whitmore? She's always been mean to us, but she's never done anything like this before." "Tommy, don't." Sarah started, but Detective Reynolds held up a hand. "It's okay. Sometimes kids see things more clearly than adults." He crouched down to Tommy's eye level. "Can you tell me what happened?" "I was feeding the ducks like I do every morning before school. Mom says it's good for me to have a routine because of my CP. Then Mrs. Whitmore came running over with the shovel, yelling about violations and disease-carrying rats." "They're not rats," Karen muttered automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, the ducks are a legitimate health concern. They create unsanitary conditions." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop talking for a moment," Detective Reynolds said firmly. He turned back to Tommy. "Then what happened?" "She said she was going to fill in the pond where the ducks live. When I laughed because she called them rats, she got really angry. She raised the shovel like she was going to hit me." Karen felt her world tilting. "That's not. I wasn't going to hit him. I was making a point." By brandishing a gardening tool at a disabled child, Detective Reynolds stood up, his 6-foot frame suddenly seeming imposing. "He's not disabled," Karen snapped, immediately regretting it. "I mean, he's just different. I wasn't thinking about his condition." Sarah's face went white with rage. "Not disabled? My son has cerebral palsy, Karen. He's in a wheelchair. How is that not disabled?" "I didn't mean." Karen stumbled over her words. "I just meant he's smart and capable and you still threatened him with a shovel." Detective Reynolds interrupted. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to understand something. What you did here crosses several legal lines. Threatening a minor, especially one with disabilities, is taken very seriously." Karen's perfectly organized world began to crumble. She built her entire identity around being the responsible one, the keeper of standards, the protector of property values. Now she was being painted as some kind of monster. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm a pillar of this community. I volunteer at the library. I organize the neighborhood watch. I would never hurt a child." "Yet you just did," Sarah said quietly. "You traumatized my son because you don't like ducks." "It's not about the ducks," Karen exploded. "It's about rules. It's about order. It's about maintaining the standards that make this neighborhood desirable." "And is threatening children part of those standards?" Detective Reynolds asked. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time in years, she had no ready answer, no regulation to cite, no policy to hide behind. She was just a 52-year-old woman, who'd let her need for control spiral completely out of hand. A second police car pulled up, and Karen watched as her neighbors began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Chen from next door, the Johnsons from across the street, the Rodriguez family with their 3 kids. They were all staring at her, all seeing her at her worst moment. "Am I under arrest?" Karen asked quietly. Detective Reynolds looked at her thoughtfully. "That depends on what happens next. What you feel in your heart doesn't matter," David said bluntly. "What matters is what you did and how it appears to others. You targeted a family repeatedly, and it culminated in you threatening their disabled child with a weapon." Karen buried her face in her hands. "What about the HOA? What about my position?" Janet Phillips called an emergency board meeting. "You're being removed as president effective immediately. The board is also considering whether to pursue legal action against you personally for bringing negative attention to the community. They're suing me. Property values in Maple Grove Estates are already dropping. 3 houses went off the market this afternoon. The community is now associated with child abuse and discrimination. The financial impact could be significant." Karen felt nauseated. "I was trying to protect property values. You've destroyed them instead." David's voice was matter of fact. "Karen, I need you to understand something. This isn't going away. The video has been shared thousands of times. Your name is attached to one of the most inflammatory stories of the week. What do I do? You need a criminal defense attorney, not an HOA lawyer, and you need to start thinking about damage control." As if summoned by his words, Karen's phone rang. The caller ID showed her husband's number. "Hello, Richard," she'd answered weakly. "Karen, what the hell did you do?" Richard's voice was strained. "I'm getting calls at work. The partners are asking questions. My clients are asking questions." "I made a mistake," Karen said quietly. "A mistake." Richard's voice rose. "You threatened a child with a weapon. It's all over the internet. Our neighbors are giving interviews calling you a monster." "Richard, please. I'm staying at my brother's tonight. We'll talk when you get home. But Karen, I don't know how we come back from this." The line went dead. Karen stared at the phone, then at David, who was watching her with professional sympathy. "My marriage is over," she said numbly. "That's not my area of expertise," David replied. "But I will say this. Your actions have consequences far beyond the legal system. You've hurt a lot of people, and healing that damage is going to take time." "What about Tommy? How is he?" "According to Janet, he's okay physically. Emotionally, well, that's harder to assess. His parents are considering whether to pursue a civil lawsuit in addition to the criminal charges." Karen closed her eyes. "I need to make this right." "I'm not sure you can," David said honestly. "Some things can't be fixed with an apology. Some damage is permanent." As Karen was led back to her cell to await bail, she realized that her obsession with maintaining perfect community standards had destroyed not just her own life, but potentially the lives of everyone around her. The very thing she tried to protect, the pristine reputation of Maple Grove Estates, now lay in ruins, and she was the one who'd wielded the shovel. 3 days later, Karen sat in her living room, surrounded by boxes and the remnants of her old life. The house felt hollow without Richard's presence, and the constant buzz of news vans outside made her a prisoner in her own home. Her phone had been disconnected after the death threats became too numerous to ignore. A knock at the door made her jump. Through the peephole, she saw Sarah Henderson standing on her porch alone. Karen opened the door slowly, expecting anger or legal documents. Instead, she found herself face to face with a woman who looked exhausted but determined. "We need to talk," Sarah said simply. Karen stepped aside to let her in, noting how Sarah's eyes took in the packed boxes and the general disarray of the house. "You're leaving," Sarah observed. "I don't have much choice," Karen replied. "The HOA is forcing me to sell. The community wants me gone." "Is that what you want?" Karen was startled by the question. "What I want? What I want is to take back the last 3 days. What I want is to never have picked up that shovel." Sarah sat down without being invited. "Tommy asked me to come see you." "Tommy?" Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "He's been having nightmares, but not about you threatening him. He's been having nightmares about you going to jail. He keeps asking if you're okay. Karen felt tears burning her eyes. Why would he care about me? I terrorized him. Because he's a good kid who sees things differently than adults do. He remembers that you used to wave to him when he was little. He remembers that you always complimented his Halloween costumes. He can't understand how that person became the person with the shovel. Karen sank into her chair. I don't understand it either. Then help me understand, Sarah said. Help me understand how someone gets so focused on rules that they forget about people. Karen was quiet for a long moment. When I became HOA president, I thought I was protecting something important. This neighborhood, these property values, this sense of order and community. I thought I was the guardian of something special, at the expense of actual community. I didn't see it that way then. Karen wiped her eyes. I saw problems that needed solving. Violations that needed correcting. Standards that needed maintaining. I stopped seeing the people behind the problems, including my son, especially your son. Karen's voice was thick with shame. Tommy represented everything I couldn't control. His disability, his needs, the way your family adapted to accommodate him. It challenged my idea of what a perfect neighborhood should look like. Tommy isn't a problem to be solved, Sarah said firmly. He's a child who deserves to feel safe in his own neighborhood. Detective Reynolds' backup arrived in the form of Officer Janet Martinez, a stern woman in her 40s who took one look at the scene and immediately began photographing the mud-splattered area around Tommy's wheelchair. Karen watched in growing horror as her morning confrontation transformed into an official investigation. Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Martinez said, approaching with a digital camera, I need to document the scene. Can you show me exactly where you were standing when you raised the shovel? Karen's legs felt weak. This is all being blown out of proportion. I was just trying to solve a community problem. By threatening a child. Martinez's voice carried no sympathy. Walk me through your thinking process. As Karen reluctantly retraced her steps, she became aware of the growing crowd of neighbors. Word was spreading quickly through the development, and she could see people emerging from their houses, some still in bathrobes, drawn by the unusual sight of police cars on their quiet street. Karen. She turned to see Janet Phillips, her closest friend and fellow HOA board member, approaching with a concerned expression. What's going on? Someone said there was an incident. It's nothing, Karen said quickly, but her voice cracked. Just an HOA matter that got complicated. Janet's eyes moved from Karen to the police officers, then to Tommy, who was now surrounded by several neighborhood kids who'd come to check on him. The boy was explaining what happened, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. She came at me with the shovel like she was going to bury me or something. Tommy was saying, his natural storytelling ability turning the traumatic event into an adventure. Mom says Mrs. Whitmore's been stressed about the ducks for months. Months? Detective Reynolds turned to Karen with renewed interest. This has been an ongoing issue. Karen felt trapped. The ducks are a legitimate concern. They create mess. They could carry disease. They're affecting property values. Have you filed complaints with animal control? Officer Martinez asked. Well, no, but have you consulted with environmental authorities about the natural water collection? That's not my job. I'm just trying to maintain community standards. Janet stepped closer, her expression growing more concerned. Karen, you didn't tell me you were planning to confront the Hendersons directly. We agreed to send a formal letter through the HOA attorney. Karen's face flushed. The letter would have taken weeks. This needed immediate action. With a shovel? Janet's voice rose in disbelief. Karen, what were you thinking? I was thinking about our property values. Karen exploded. I was thinking about the covenant all of us signed. I was thinking about maintaining the standards that make this neighborhood worth living in. By terrorizing a 12-year-old. Mrs. Chen had approached, her elderly voice carrying surprising strength. Karen, I've watched you become more and more obsessed with control. This isn't about property values anymore. Karen spun to face her neighbor. Mrs. Chen, with all due respect, you don't understand the complexities of HOA management. I know that now. But by the time I realized what I'd become, it was too late. I don't really let my need for control turn me into exactly the kind of person I never wanted to be. Sarah studied Karen's face. Tommy wants to know if you're sorry. I'm more sorry than I have words for, Karen said immediately. I'm sorry I make him afraid. I'm sorry I make him feel unwelcome. I'm sorry I let my issues become his burden. Are you sorry enough to make real changes? Karen looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, are you sorry enough to use this experience to help other people? To make sure this doesn't happen to other families? I don't understand. Sarah leaned forward. The district attorney is willing to consider a plea agreement. Community service focused on disability advocacy. Education programs for HOA boards. Real work that might prevent other kids from going through what Tommy went through. You'd support that? After what I did? I'd support anything that might create something positive out of this nightmare, Sarah said. But only if you're genuinely committed to change. Only if you understand that this isn't about you finding redemption. It's about you doing the hard work of becoming a better person. Karen nodded slowly. What does Tommy think about all this? He thinks people deserve second chances, but only if they really want to change. Sarah stood up. He also wants you to know that the ducks are doing fine. They've moved to the pond at the park, where they're probably happier anyway. As Sarah headed toward the door, Karen called out, Sarah? Yes. Will you tell Tommy that I'm going to try to be worthy of his forgiveness? Sarah paused at the door. I'll tell him. But Karen, don't do it for him. Don't even do it for me. Do it because it's the right thing to do. After Sarah left, Karen sat in her empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of her old life. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the neighborhood continuing without her. Children playing, lawnmowers running, the normal rhythm of suburban life. She picked up her phone and called the number the district attorney had given her. It was time to start the real work of making amends. But even as she began to plan her community service and educational programs, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that there were still secrets in Maple Grove Estates, still neighbors with hidden resentments and unspoken conflicts. Her downfall had been swift and public, but she wondered what other powder kegs were waiting to explode in their seemingly perfect community. The ducks might have moved to the park, but the underlying tensions that had driven her to that moment of madness, those were still there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the next person to crack under the pressure of maintaining suburban perfection. As she began to pack the last of her belongings, Karen realized that her story might be ending, but Maple Grove Estate's story was far from over. Karen Whitmore stood in her pristine front yard at 6:47 a.m., clutching a landscaping shovel like a weapon of suburban justice. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair trembled with righteous indignation as she marched toward the Hendersons' property line, where 12-year-old Tommy sat in his wheelchair, quietly feeding breadcrumbs to a family of ducks. Absolutely not, Karen shrieked, her voice carrying across Maple Grove Estates like a battle cry. This ends today. Tommy looked up, startled, his cerebral palsy making his movements slightly jerky as he turned his wheelchair toward the approaching storm that was Karen. His mother, Sarah, rushed out from the garage where she'd been loading groceries. Karen, what are you doing? Sarah demanded, stepping protectively in front of her son. What I should have done months ago. Karen raised the shovel dramatically. This wildlife sanctuary your son has created is in direct violation of HOA Covenant 47B. No resident shall maintain conditions that attract nuisance wildlife. Tommy's eyes widened as Karen advanced, her designer sneakers squelching in the muddy duck pond that had formed naturally in the low-lying area between their properties. The ducks scattered, quacking in alarm. You're going to fill this pond right now, Karen continued, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter windows. And if you won't do it, I will. Sarah stepped closer, her hands clenched into fists. Karen, you're scaring my son. This is a natural depression that fills with rainwater. We didn't create it. Oh, please. Karen's laugh was sharp and bitter. You've been encouraging this swamp. I've seen you both out here, feeding those disease-carrying rats with wings. The absurdity of the situation hit Tommy first. Despite his fear, a small giggle escaped his lips. They're just ducks, Mrs. Whitmore. They're not rats. Karen's face flushed crimson. Don't you dare laugh at me, young man. I am the HOA president, and I will not be mocked by some. She caught herself, but the damage was done. The unspoken word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Somewhat, Karen? Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. Karen's grip tightened on the shovel handle. 3 years of accumulated frustration with the Henderson family bubbled over. Their slightly overgrown grass, their car parked 2 inches into the street, their son's medical equipment cluttering their front porch. It all represented everything wrong with her neighborhood. Some family that doesn't respect property values, Karen finished weakly, knowing it sounded pathetic. But Tommy wasn't backing down. My dad says the ducks were here before the houses were. They're just trying to live like us. That's when Karen made the decision that would change everything. She raised the shovel high above her head, her face twisted with fury, and brought it down hard into the soft earth beside Tommy's wheelchair. The boy instinctively flinched, his chair rolling backward as mud splattered across his lap. Sarah screamed, lunging forward just as Karen raised the shovel again. What the hell is going on here? The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Detective Mike Reynolds stood at the edge of the Henderson property, his hand resting casually on his radio. He'd been driving by on his way to work when he spotted the commotion. Karen froze, shovel still raised, suddenly aware of how the scene must look to an outsider. A grown woman threatening a disabled child with a gardening tool while his mother desperately tried to protect him. "Officer, thank God you're here," Karen said, quickly lowering the shovel but not releasing it. "I'm dealing with an HOA violation, and these people are being completely unreasonable." Detective Reynolds' eyes moved from Karen to Tommy, who was now crying quietly, then to Sarah, whose face had gone pale with shock and anger. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put down that shovel," he said calmly, his training kicking in. "And then we're going to have a conversation about what exactly is happening here." Karen's perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she realized her position. The shovel suddenly felt impossibly heavy in her hands, and for the first time in 3 years of HOA presidency, she wondered if she might have gone too far.